Hello everyone, welcome back to a podcast of one's own. This is episode number 6 and today we'll be speaking about gender in art. And we decided to pick this topic because as in society there's a divide when it comes to the genders. So with regards to arts, 51% of visual artists are actually women, but 78% of all galleries exhibit more men than women, and only 5% represent an equal number of male and female artists.
5%?
That's pretty surprising statistic. Yeah. I wasn't in the session, so I have no idea about these statistics, but 51%, that's incredible because I would never have thought.
But that's the thing, that's a lot of the reason, a big reason why I wanted to do the session to start with, because from the beginning of art history, women have always been engaged in making art and being artists. It's just a matter of not getting represented and being overlooked and not valued for making their art. So and it also skews the history of art a lot. So when you look back at records from starting even from ancient Roman and Greek art, there's basically that on the whole, in a big perspective, no art by women, because and that does not mean that they were not making it. There's always been women in art, but they've not gotten representation and not gotten up the space. So it really created a male canon in the art and in culture.
Yes.
Which is obviously the stereotypes have then forced certain in areas where women were actually successful, that has then made caused a gendering of art forms. So if women were particularly successful in an art form, say fine arts, textile art, knitting, crocheting, that was all really considered art a long time ago, but now as it's become more gendered, it used to be dominated by men because mainly all art was to start with, but as women became more influential in that art part of art, it's also demoted to being called arts and crafts or just recreational DIY. It's not really even talked about as art.
Yeah, it's true. And we talked a lot about the challenges that artists and especially female artists in particular faced when they tried to enter the art world or the art scene, because obviously if you want to make a living of it, you have to exhibit, you have to sell paintings, as unfortunate as it is. So yeah, we talked a bit about the sort of classist hierarchy in the art world and in the art scene, and that as with a lot of pretty much everything, the gatekeepers to these galleries and to enter the art scene are male, and most of them are quite old, probably white.
It started
cisgendered. So
I was talking a little bit about how during the major shift that's happened for women in art has happened in the 19th century, basically in the second half of in the 20th century, in the second half of the 1900s, and it started with Peggy Guggenheim. She was an artist, and she's got, at this point there are lots of different Guggenheim museums across the world, and they're really, really famous and great galleries for art. But it started out with her approaching the director of the national, I think it was the National Modern Art Museum, and this was...
That was in the 1940s.
Yeah, that was in the 1940s, and she approached him pointing out that, you have no art by women. and he countered by saying,
great art.
No, but there are so many great female artists, and he named them and he knew them, but he didn't exhibit them. And that's one point where I think a big divide happens, because people can get away with women are doing art, they're making good things, but if they're not getting the exposure, the playing field is not equal anyway.
Yeah.
And it limits what type of art you can make, because certain art is more controversial and it's gonna poke people in the eye, and they're not gonna be willing to portray it. That was a big part of the movement from realism to abstraction, especially for female artists. They were like really at the forefront of abstract art becoming bigger, because they could explore their creativity without being criticized for being like too womanly. Like it didn't necessarily show
reveal the gender. Yeah, because that's what we also said in the session. We perceive art differently when we know, or when we make assumptions about the gender of the artist. So if you know it's a woman's painting, you might be like, oh, even with abstract art, you could be like, oh, well, that person sure had a lot of anger. Like, or I mean, I could imagine, like I could hear.
But like one of the examples that I brought up was the movie. Well, it's not actually a movie to start with, but there's a movie now that I think is most likely that people will have heard it from. It's called Big Eyes, and it's about like, oh, I actually can't remember her name right now. That's really bad. It's a story about this female artist who did amazing, like she made amazing paintings, but her husband was the one, like they put the husband's name on them, so that they would have a bigger chance of kind of getting noticed. And then he got all the credit, and then kind of like snowballed out of control. And then when it actually came forward that she was the creator, it changed the way that people saw the paintings. It was like totally different.
But it's crazy how, like, because I'm doing publishing, and it's the same in literature. I think I talk a bit about Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein.
Yeah.
Amazing and like revolutionary book at the time, but she first pretty much had to publish it under her husband's name, because they were like, no one's gonna read this sort of dystopian story when they know that it's been written by a woman. And up to this day, it's still such a common thing for publishing houses. For example, when J.K. Rowling published Harry Potter, they put her initials there for a purpose, because they were like, it's a story about a boy, but
if they see Joanne or like on the cover,
exactly, men and boys are not going to want to read it if they know it's a female author. So you have this huge bias against women in like arts or like the creative sort of scene.
It's a terrible topic to discuss, because it's so like subconscious as well. Like I think very few people will be like, no, like that wouldn't affect if I bought it or not. But then you're like, but you don't actually like know if it would affect you technically. Like on the whole, statistically, it shows that it does affect you. That this bias actually operates. But a lot of boys would probably, like, if they were to choose what book to buy, they wouldn't say, oh yeah, I make a conscious decision to not buy female author books.
It's all subconscious.
I think it also categorizes, I mean, I don't know about visual art as much, just on the time of publishing, which is a bit off topic, but sometimes there is this generalization of categorizing all women's literature as, for example, young adult. So for example,
romance.
For in the example of J.K. Rowling, the story like Harry Potter, now it's not considered young adult right now, because now it's considered literature. But maybe if it had been published under Joanna back in the day,
in publishing,
it would have been considered young adult, and maybe it would not have had the same impact that we know of. And I'm sure, I don't know that much about visual arts, but I'm sure that, I mean, Katrina was saying that again before, like, you make assumptions about painting by looking at the artist, and that's absolutely normal, because every artist tends to put themselves in their art.
Of course, yeah.
But I think there would be a generalization. If you knew that a painting was made by a woman rather than a man, you would then sort of go, oh, that's what she's trying to signify.
Yeah, you would.
Which is not necessarily a bad thing, because it would shed light on certain problematics, but then maybe it would not be as popular, maybe, or as...
I think it also like limits female artists as well. We were looking at a talk between some different women artists, and they were talking about like wanting to portray like the struggle of being a woman in the patriarchy into your art, but also being sick of that having to be the subject there are all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
And being like, can I just make art about something else? Like, why do people always have to read this as like a feminist
statement? Yeah.
Statement. And to a certain extent, like art by women in an oppressed position will be feminist because it's still like their voice being shared. So no matter what they're sharing, that is the feminist sharing. But I think it's a difficult, like it brings up the whole thing that's similar in any business that's got to do with quotas. Like a lot of galleries are doing specifically like women exhibitions with only art by women. And then there are arguments for that being causing a greater divide and separating men and women more. But then also that's like maybe the only space for women to actually get their art out. And we also talked about how it's a safe space for like their like levels of it. So there's exhibitions for only women, there's exhibitions for only black women, there's exhibitions for
lesbian
like
art.
Of only lesbian women. And obviously that creates a safe space for people to go and watch this art as well, where they feel safe to.
And it's pretty much the same as when we talk about like quotas in the workplace. Like we would all love to live in a society where we
don't need quotas.
Well, we wouldn't need that, but unfortunately we don't yet. So it's the only way for female artists to get like exposure and to gain recognition, as unfortunate as it is. So I think it's for now it's a good way to give them a platform to share their art and to actually make a name for themselves.
I also think like the fact that we really lack a historical record of women artists.
That's what I was thinking about too.
It really influences, even subconsciously, what like it internalizes the idea that women can't really do art, or like that it's not for them, because lack of representation historically will do that. It's the same as in any business. If we don't see, if young black girls don't see their like demographic group represented in cinema, for example, they will subconsciously just not think that to be an option for them. And it's the same in art, and it's been going for like centuries and centuries.
I cannot remember, like I did history of art in high school for 3 years, and the only person that I remember studying who was a woman is Artemisia Gentileschi. Check her out if you don't know who she is. But we didn't spend much. I mean, as much as I remember, we didn't spend as much time.
You spent so much time about talking. I mean, don't get me wrong. Like
it's important.
I like impressionism, but like I'm sorry, but they all look the same. Like the paintings all look the same to me. They all did the same thing. I mean, people who study art are probably gonna be like, no, but Monet is so different from Manet. Like, oh my god. But I feel like there is a lot of time allocated to talk about the differences, like the minor differences between like all of these people. And then the only woman who came up in my art major class was Frida Kahlo.
The National Museum for Modern, National Women's Museum for Modern Art, I think it is. They started this campaign called Five Women Artists, hashtag 5 women artists, and it would basically like challenge people to name 5 women artists.
I couldn't.
I sat and researched this and I was like, this is terrible, I can't even do it.
I can't even name. But the thing is, again, like you were saying, maybe artists are gonna be like, well, that's your own problem because I know it, and that's fine, amazing. But the difference is that I'm not an artist, but with my high school experience, with my like personal knowledge experience, I could name 5 men artists. So I should be able to do the same thing with women too.
But the reason why you're not able to do that is because it's not because you're uneducated or whatever.
No, it's because I wasn't educated on it.
Yeah, but it's because you don't talk about it in school. You
don't have anything to refer back to. Like a lot of these, like Picasso, Monet, like Mark Rothko, like you see them without doing. Like you don't have to seek them out.
No,
you see them.
But
and that's the problem with a lot of things for women. Like you have to actively seek them out.
I think
People
this is
don't
so
even know
interesting,
that they have to.
considering the fact that women are the subject of so many paintings.
Yes.
The fact that most of them are not done by women.
That is the most, like, to me,
If
that's
you think
the most
about it,
absurd thing about it.
You have the example of, like, I think it was Michelangelo, my humanistic brain is gonna murder me, because if it's not Michelangelo, I think it was him, who literally just painted women as men, but they just put apples in, like, apple forms as breasts, because they had no idea of what female anatomy was like.
But it had to be a woman in the painting, though.
I didn't know that.
Like, it, honestly, there was a part of what we talked about the feminist art movement starting in the 70s. A big part of it is...
Sorry, I just put up on our big screen the things that I'm referring to.
Hilarious. That's genuinely, like...
I don't even know
I
what
should
it is.
everybody in this room.
It is kind of disturbing.
Everyone
interesting,
listening,
right?
Google Michelangelo women and just like look at the bodies, and then just like the breasts that they just like popped
But
on
like
there.
the bodies, they're
That's
so
hilarious.
well done. Like all the proportions
Yeah.
are like right.
The attention put in the bodies, of course, everything. I think it's just, like, I don't think it's Michelangelo's fault. Maybe my man has, and like, you know, maybe he couldn't even portray women's breasts because there was like a lot of, he already went through a lot of trouble for like nudity and everything. He had to put veils on his pictures or whatever. But I think it's just interesting that so many women are portrayed, and yet
They've always
where
been
are
objects
the
of
women
art.
portraying themselves?
The Gorilla Girls are like they're a feminist group, an organization for women in art, and they started working in the late 1900s, and they made this banner that like I'm sure they made like way more things, but it's really powerful. It just
I have it here. What it says. It says less than 5% of artists in the modern art section are women, but 85% of nudes are female.
Yeah.
And that's not online nudes. That's like old classical fucking Baroque painting nudes.
And even if you think about it, when we look back in history, this is just my personal conclusion, which may be completely wrong. If it is completely wrong, please let us know. I'm open to criticism this time, because this just came up to my mind. If you think about how we view women's body too, right? And how we go back into what women's body were popular during the different ages, we take so much of it from art. If you think about we know that in medieval times or in the Renaissance, women were liked when they were more rounded, curvy, because that's what the arts portrayed. So we have a history of accepting women based on how men think of them as visually.
There's also
pretty.
the whole idea that like depending on what area of depending on what area of history it is, like most of the art that depicts women in that way, that it's still commissions. People are either like, even if they're dressed, even if they're not nudes, there's really, really wealthy people, really wealthy men that have commissioned these paintings to like portray their wives, and obviously they just want to like they're attempting to kind of like brag about everything. They want to show like how much money they have. They want to dress in all these amazing things, make them look as good as you possibly can, and it's not necessarily realistic.
So like if you guys want to Google it, the Venus of Urbino by Tiziano, that's Tiziano. Sorry, my Italian is coming through. That's considered, I think, to be one of the most sensual paintings, right? And it's done by a man and it's of a woman. But if you think about it, it is a beautiful painting. Nobody can argue against it. Like, it's absolutely gorgeous. She is gorgeous. The painting is absolutely marvelous. But if you think about how much the sensualization of women is prominent in arts, and yet no women are in arts, I think that's just really interesting. That is not to say that I should think we should shit on every art that is not made by women.
No.
Because we have such amazing art, and I think visual art is such an important...
It's just about putting forward the representation that's not been there. And it goes
the thing is that it's like you said, it's such an important part of our culture. But how does it actually... It only represents like half of the culture.
Yeah.
If it's done by men. Like, sorry, but the female gaze, to put it that way, it's also important, like, and that's not there. So
I think it's
as much as I appreciate it,
like the women, like a woman's perspective on art and creativity, and give space for that and show that it's important and valuable, but also to like tackle the internalized idea that women feel like they don't have a space in art, which is just terrible.
So the last thing you talked about was how we as individuals can actually make an impact or we can sort of do something about this and talk to galleries and like change, actually like speak, just go there and speak to the people. Because I remember last summer when I was in Berlin, there was an exhibition and it was like a visual that like video installation. It was really, really cool. But then after, my friend was like, did you notice that there wasn't a single female like painter? It was all men. And I was like, oh, actually I didn't.
Like that's then a moment that you could actually feed that back to.
And I really, really liked it. And in hindsight, I'm kind of like, I should have just gone there and be like, hey, I really enjoyed it. Or maybe just go online, because they have like obviously social media. Be like, hey, I really enjoyed it. I think it's great what you did. It's a shame that you didn't include any female artists. Why not? And maybe just try to highlight this issue to them.
I mean, it's literally like the function and the job of these galleries and museums. So they should have no problem doing that.
Yeah. So just support female like artists, obviously in general, but also especially obviously female artists.
Buy art by women.
And this pay, buy art, pay artists
in general. Just support any minority who's doing
cool
stuff.
Also, with like social media, it's good in a way for artists, because they, like I said earlier, with like the whole gatekeepers, that isn't really the case anymore, because you can get your art exposed. Like you can get people. Get attention for your art if you post it on like social media, online, whatever. But then also, followers or likes don't really equal sales.
No, exactly.
So like just because everyone likes your post on Instagram, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can make a living of it. And it's still like really, really hard. And there's a lot of exploitation, because people just ignore your copyright and they use your pictures anyway. So be careful with that. Be respectful of all the work and the effort the artists put in. So yeah, speak to galleries, speak to your friends. If you find an artist, just share her work.
And go back in history, like try to pick out like women artists in history. Like it's actually really interesting to hear their stories.
I think I have a suggestion. Wait, give me 2 seconds, guys. And this is not very professional, but if you want, follow on Instagram Clitbait blog, CLITBAIT blog.
Like clickbait.
Yes, like clit, exactly. And they have tons of like things about women in arts, minority in arts. It's really cool.
I love that.
So yeah, go for it. It's really interesting. It's a blog and it's also on Instagram if you wanna look it up. I think it was suggested to me by Kaylee, but it's really interesting. So,
yeah, but see, that's how you find these things, and that's how you find art, because someone suggested it or recommends it. Word of mouth.
Yes,
really important.
On that topic, actually, just before we round up, shout out to Kaylee.
Yes,
she's the Equality and Diversity Officer at ENSA, and she's also a member of GenSoc, and we love her very much. But she is running a series of events for Disability Month, National Disability Month, and it is lots of different things going on at different campuses. So it started off yesterday, I think, and there's more to come. There's a Disability Sports Day today at Sighthill No, not today. This is when we're recording it. I'm sorry. Ignore that. But it will be coming up, and all the information should be around the campuses and on ENSO's website. So check that out and, learn more.
Yeah, just keep learning, guys. And yeah, so I think that's it from us for today.
Yeah.
Yes.
And next week we'll be talking about men's rights activism. Should be an interesting one. Stay tuned for it. Bye.
Bye.